Yeah, and I think that this is the kind of crucial point to highlight because obviously China and Russia, of course, have terrible records when it comes to human rights, freedom of speech, and everything else, and that's been used against Snowden, even though obviously he's in an incredibly precarious and vulnerable position. Particularly right now, being stranded at a Moscow airport. But so much of the intention being focused on Ecuador, which, despite its problems and can be a place of legitimate criticism, clearly has the best record by far of those three places. And yet, most of the effort that we've seen from a communications and PR perspective has been targeted at Ecuador. That obviously highlights and reflects what you're saying. Now, that said, President Correa seems like he's sort of stepped back from what appeared to be several days ago, like a relatively high likelihood that Ecuador would offer Snowden asylum. And Correa's done a couple of interesting things over the past couple of days. He simultaneously unilaterally canceled preferential trade status with the United States, which is what the sort of big economic carrot that the U.S. was holding over Ecuador. So he did that. And then at the same time, he has at least rhetorically walked back and the notion of giving Snowden asylum and said that it's going to be a long process and he's not sure about it. And he appreciated his phone call with Vice President Biden. So how do you kind of read the signals that Correa is sending now?
I am not really an expert on the internal politics in Ecuador or South American relations with the U.S. It's pretty clear that
do you think that
that the X factor here is Julian Assange, and that Assange has attempted to manage Snowden, and there may be a power struggle between Correa and Assange, and there are also technicalities about how to get Snowden out of Moscow. Correa had arranged for a temporary travel document, but it's really difficult to get him through without a passport. And the U.S. has revoked his passport, and I don't know what Assange has tried to do, but there have been reports of a kind of power struggle between the two.
Do you know if these those Ecuadorian leaked documents had any real effect on Ecuador's decision on Snowden, and also do you know if those documents had any effect on what Ecuadorians think about Correa?
I doubt that this story had much of an effect in Ecuador, although the Interior Minister Jose Serrano was asked to answer for them at a press conference, and he issued a pretty defensive response, but he said that Ecuador doesn't conduct mass spying on its citizens, and that that if it does surveillance, it's used. It's kind of the response the U.S. used, but BuzzFeed had sold this story as kind of an expose about a program that was on the same level as the NSA in the U.S., and yet they've been forced to admit that that this equipment described in the documents may have never been used by Ecuador's intelligence services.
So it really would be the distinction between if it was leaked that the NSA and the U.S. intelligence apparatus was considering PRISM versus actually implementing something, and yet this was sort of leveled as being equally as explosive.
I did a report from Mondoweiss on some of the equipment that the NSA was using to monitor American calls, like at AT&T, how they were routing the fiber optic transmissions to NSA listening centers, and they were using Israeli equipment. They were using a machine called the Naris Insight, and this is one of the most advanced pieces of surveillance equipment, and I don't see any evidence that the equipment described by BuzzFeed can do anything like the Naris Insight, and that something that costs $500,000 could be used.
Right. That's a very small sum for
scale.
These. Yeah. Right.
I mean, what Correa is doing is much more crude, which is using criminal libel law against people who are publicly opposed to him, and I think that's bad enough. He doesn't really need to conduct spying to crack down on his opponents. And in South American politics, I mean, we saw it how the opposition media was used in Venezuela. This is a zero-sum game. These opponents and right-wing antagonists are not using democratic means themselves.
That's right.
They are openly calling for a coup. I remember there was an attempt after 9/11 in the Venezuelan opposition media, a sustained attempt that went on for years to link Chavez to Al-Qaeda. The opposition media in Ecuador is trying desperately to link Ecuador to Iran.
And Hezbollah.
So it's not. I mean, it's like Fox News on steroids, and then, or it's like just Fox News all the time, and then you have Otto Reich. I mean, Otto Reich is singled out for engaging in covert propaganda activities on behalf of the Contras, and he's lecturing a government on the democratic use of the media and on free speech and the free press. It's a joke.
Yeah, and I think it's and Otto Reich. I mean, to be really clear, I mean, this is someone who he was given a really hard time by people like former Senator Chris Dodd. This was not. This was it was very universally understood that this guy was an incredibly toxic and noxious force in Latin America as well as the United States. And that cannot be kind of, reaffirmed enough. I want to get back in the final part of our talk to BuzzFeed. And what's interesting, I don't know, Ben Smith wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago actually defending Snowden as a source and criticizing journalists sort of piling on him. And even the Greenwald profile they published was more subtle than the New York Daily News piece. And I think that, so that's the kind of interesting space that BuzzFeed occupies, because I'm certain if you asked, I think Rosie Gray has actually been on this show before, or on Ring of Fire, maybe. I don't know. She's been interviewed by Sam before on some good sort of liberal investigative journalism against the Koch brothers or somebody like that. So what do you think? Do you think that my sense from you is that you think there's a really specific danger in BuzzFeed's receptivity to all of this kind of covert PR material, precisely because they actually do some, leaving aside all the entertainment, obviously, but they do some good journalism. They do have a kind of liberal reputation, and yet they're a conduit for the types of forces you're talking about.
Yeah, that's an important point. I don't know about Ben Smith. I mean, I've had some suspicions about him, but I don't really see Rosie Gray necessarily as a hardcore ideologue. And as I said before, BuzzFeed is sort of a PR laundromat. Basically, what these reporters want, they're access journalists. They're everything that Michael Hastings was not. They're the opposite of Michael Hastings, and I thought it was kind of ironic that Ben Smith wound up eulogizing him. And what Michael Hastings...
and that he worked there was interesting,
So they're access journalists. They want access, and a good way to get access in D.C. is to maintain connections with lobbyists who are always, shopping stories on behalf of their clients, who are often foreign governments, and who and maintain ties with people who are operatives, who are powerful people. And Ben Smith is incredibly networked in with the neocons in Washington. He's accepted lobbying favors on behalf of the government of Georgia. I mean, I've seen that on DOJ FARA documents, along with people like Eli Lake, and he's written some really pathetic defenses of himself. This is through the firm called Orion Strategies, run by Michael Goldfarb, who is a hard right-wing Likudnik neocon lobbyist who also runs the Free Beacon, which is a right-wing magazine, and advises the Emergency Committee for Israel, this front group that was attacking Chuck Hagel as a terrorist-loving, mollycoddling anti-Semite. And so at the same time, while Ben Smith had accepted favors from this lobbying group and gone out to dinner, dinner sponsored by the Republic of Georgia, and possibly run stories that the government of Georgia fed him, he's promoted Emergency Committee for Israel propaganda by covering it, under the guise of journalism. I'm not saying that he was doing it because he necessarily agreed with it. It's just you have a constant, steady stream of stories that are pushing your career forward, and people are reading them, and they seem to be relevant. I don't know why anyone would give publicity to a group like the Emergency Committee for Israel. But when you're an access journalist, it's really a question of who can ply you, who can supply you with the most stories. And usually, it's the most aggressive PR operation in D.C. with the most corporate money. ECI is funded by Adelson. They have a ton of money, and they can do that kind of thing. And so they rely on people like Ben Smith and Rosie Gray. And here we have another example of that. Some people just came to them and said, "We got documents for you. If you'll defend this story, we'll give you these leaked documents, this exclusive. It's an incredible story about Ecuador. And if you're an access journalist, you're amoral, and you probably don't really have very strong beliefs one way or another." And so that lets you be plied by the right wing. I can tell you that since my story came out, other journalists have told me that they receive emails almost every week, if not every day, from a Republican operative I'd never heard of before on Ecuador, and that this Republican operative has an account with some Ecuadorian opposition group and is bombarding journalists every week, feeding them with stories, and you don't see that happening from the other side. So this is really a case of access journalism, and it's a case of access journalism gone wrong and everything that Michael Hastings was not.
Right, and it's not. There was that controversy that erupted over that blogger whose name I'm completely escapes me right now, but who was taking the right-wing blogger who was taking money from the Malaysian government to smear opposition figures.
Josh Trevino.
Josh Trevino.
Oh, yeah.
And this is not, and everybody recognized. I mean, I remember I did some TV hit on that. That was universally recognized as being completely ethically dubious at best, disgusting, wrong, bad practice. Because he got and also because it just wasn't as subtle as these other arrangements are, and I think that's why these arrangements are probably even more problematic.
There's also
what this piece points to.
There's also no one that America wants trying to apply for asylum in Croatia, and they're using it
in Malaysia. Yeah.
Now wait a minute. Let me just say something about that.
Yeah, please.
I've been following this pretty closely, and Trevino, was he's just like one of the worst things I've ever encountered through the internet in my life. It's like worse than like a snuff film that you accidentally come across when he tweets at you. It's like you've just been slimed for the day. I'm
not going to ask you a follow-up about accidentally coming across snuff films, but go ahead.
And so I wasn't really, shedding any tears when this story came out. But first of all, I think this was a story by Rosie Gray and BuzzFeed that was marketed as an exclusive. It was not an exclusive. Malaysian opposition bloggers had revealed his lobbying well before the story. I had alerted The Guardian when they gave him a column that he was lobbying on behalf of the Malaysian government, and they dumped him for that instead of for his call for the Israeli army to assassinate American, old hippies on the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. But what she did on Twitter, and so I just looked into why is BuzzFeed running this Trevino story now? Why were they attacking him for Malaysian lobbying? And I'd seen some evidence or suggestion that Thor Halverson was pushing this story because he's involved with the Malaysian opposition, whereas Trevino had the government account. It was obvious that this was another PR dump, probably by the Malaysian opposition. And who are they going to go to? Rosie Gray and BuzzFeed and Ben Smith, because they're just access journalists who want stories, and it's just so much easier for them to. It's great for them to actually hit a right-wing operative like Josh Trevino for once. It gives them, it makes them look balanced. Trevino is someone who's earned so many enemies. It's not like anyone's gonna.
Yeah, no one's shedding a tear over Josh Trevino. And I
Yeah.
just have to say before we sign off, later I'm going to very briefly talk about Jennifer Lopez performing for the Turkmenistan dictator. And in one of the pieces that somebody sent me about this, you know, a human rights activist who's quoted as condemning, you know, Jennifer Lopez for doing this is Thor Halvorsen. So he's definitely on the move. Max, this is a great piece. We have it linked to on our website. Thanks, man. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks for having me.